turn. We make mistakes, then we live and learn. When life gets tough, and it seems like your best ain't good enough. If you're in need of hope, you know where I'll be. I'll be right here, right here. And when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here, waiting for you.
This is the place you can always turn to when you need a friend. The Lillian McDermott Show. To reach out to Lillian, visit her on the web at whenyouneedafriend.com. Now let's all learn together. Here's Lillian McDermott.
Hello, my listening and viewing friend. It's so nice we can meet each other on the air on this beautiful, best day ever. And for those of you who are tuning into the classroom for the first time, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go to when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide natural ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening, as well as my viewing friend, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. Now, just recently, and by the way, you know, I adore Dr. Terry Wahls. We talk about her all the time in the classroom, especially when we talk about immune issues like autoimmune deficiencies. And just recently, I saw an article from Neuroscience News that cited a study of 22 million people that found autoimmune disorders now affect around 1 in 10 individuals, with women be more affected than men. And I just thought, and they even went back into the socioeconomic and they dove into all these different things. And at the end of the article, it almost sounded like they still had no clue of why this is happening. So we reached out to Dr. Terry Wahls, who is absolutely, you may not see it today, but she actually has a cape, a superhero cape, saving the world one person at a time because of her journey reversing MS, late stage MS. Dr. Terry Wahls is known, she's an author, she's known all over the world, and she is a friend of the classroom. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am grateful that Dr. Terry Wahls is here to talk to us about the updates on dietary nutritions and how it helps autoimmune deficiency. So where are you, Dr. Wahls? Come out wherever you are. There she is.
Here we are.
Here we are. I love starting the class like this. I've got my poop ready. I got everything for you. So let's talk about a little bit about your background. Thank you so much, Dr. Wahls, for coming into the classroom. Share a little bit about your background and why you're so passionate about what you do.
Okay, so I'm trained as an internal medicine physician in the academic world and had a very traditional internal medicine practice in the academic world with the latest drugs, the best science, teaching residents, medical students. And then I developed multiple sclerosis, treat my disease very aggressively, go to the best MS center in the country, take the newest drugs, and still within 3 years, I'm in a tilt recline wheelchair and have severe fatigue. And, you know, I go on to the next level of aggressive therapy, taking mitoxantrone, did not help. Then I take Tysabri, did not help. Then I'm switched to Cellcept. And then I'm asking myself, Lily, am I doing all that I can? And like, well, you know, I can still read. So I start reading the basic science, first looking for the newest drugs. Then I start looking for supplements and natural things that I could be doing. I decide mitochondria are the big problem. I redesign a mitochondrial cocktail of supplements that help my fatigue just a little bit. And I'm so grateful that, you know, my fatigue is a little bit better. And I'm slowing my decline. Very, very grateful. I also have trigeminal neuralgia, which is, you know, this intense electrical pain across my face that's getting relentlessly worse. And then I discover a study using electrical stimulation of muscles in people who are paralyzed. And they're never going to walk again, but the electrical stimulation made me really curious. Could that be something I use? And so I convinced my physical therapist to give me a test session. It hurts really bad, Lily. I mean, it's really quite painful. But when it's over, I feel great. And my therapist says it's probably from the endorphins. And we add electrical stimulation of muscles to my physical therapy. And I can do it 10 minutes every day as part of my very simple little floor exercise that I do every day. Because if I do it any longer than that, I can't function. I can't go off to work. And then I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. At about the same time, they have a course on neuroprotection, which I take, and I have a longer list of supplements for my brain. And there's a lot of stuff about mitochondria, so it really resonates with me. I've already been following the paleo diet for 5 years, no grains, no legumes, no dairy. But I have a really big aha around December. And now I sort of laugh at myself, Lily, about how long it took to have this aha. It's like, what if I redesign my paleo diet based on all these supplements? And so I have to do more research to figure out where those nutrients are in the food supply, what foods to stress and eat, etc. And I start this new way of eating December 26, 2007. Now, for context for all of your listeners, at that point in my life, I could not sit up in a regular chair like you are and I am now for more than 10 minutes. I was in a zero gravity chair when I was staffing the clinics and doing my work at the university. So my knees would be higher than my nose, sort of like the astronauts in those spaceships. Or I'd be in bed. I could take a few steps using 2 walking sticks. I was beginning to have brain fog, and so I knew I was soon going to have to take in medical disability because of brain fog. And I was very, it was clear I was on track to become bedridden by my illness, demented by my illness, and my trigeminal neuralgia would probably turn permanently on. And when it's on, Lily, light, sound trigger the electrical face pain. And at the jolt of pain, the world is white, so I'm blind. And at the jolt, and if I try to move my tongue to swallow, it triggers the pain. So when it turns on, I'm just drooling because I can't bear to swallow. And if I try to speak and move my tongue to speak, it triggers the pain. And when I have a pain, my face pulls down. I have an involuntary grunt. And so trying to talk would look like this. It's a pretty horrible thing for my family to watch.
Absolutely.
And a horrible thing for me to endure.
Yes.
And I knew that I was likely to, because I'd seen my father have an autonomic disturbance of his nervous system, affecting his peripheral nerves called mononeuritis multiplex. And it had eventually become constant for him and a really horrific level of pain. So I anticipated that it would become, my trigeminal neuralgia would become constant for me. And so, in 2007, it was a very grim future. But I redesigned this new way of eating. I'm taking my supplements. I am doing my electrical stimulation 10 minutes with my little simple tiny exercises. And by the end of January, I realized, my fatigue is less. My thinking is more clear. My face, I haven't had any zings. And my physical therapist says, Terry, I think you're getting stronger.
Wow.
And I start walking with walking sticks in January in the hallways at the hospital. Stuns my partners. And then, by March, I'm walking with 1 walking stick. Then in April, no walking sticks.
Wow.
And then I we used to ride bikes a lot. And so in May, and actually it's Mother's Day, I tell my family I want to try riding my bike. Now I haven't done that in 6 years, mind you. And we have an emergency family meeting. Jackie tells my 16-year-old boy, Zach, who's 6'5", so he's a big guy. Zach, you run alongside on the left. She tells my 13-year-old daughter, Zeb, you run alongside on the right, and she'll follow. And I get on my bike and I bike around the block. That big 16-year-old boy, he's crying.
Mm.
The 13-year-old girl, she's crying. Jack's crying. And when I relive that moment, tears come back into my eyes.
Sure. I'm crying. It's like,
Because that was when I understood that the current understanding of secondary progressive multiple sclerosis is incomplete. Who knows how much recovery might be possible? So every day I biked a little bit more. And in October, Jack signed me up for the Courage Ride, 18.5 miles. And, when I crossed that finish line with my family, we're all crying again.
so victorious. That's where your cape started. You're like your superhero cape.
And that's when it really changed how I thought about disease and health. Mm-hmm. It would go on to change how I practice medicine. Mm-hmm. And it would change the focus of my research. And I've since made it my mission to teach the world that, in fact, there is a lot we can do. And if you've been told that, particularly if you have an autoimmune condition or a neurologic or psychiatric condition, and you've been told there's nothing we can do, that your condition is just going to be progressively worse, and you have severe disabilities, there is hope for you, that there is stuff that you can do under your control to make your circumstances a little better, to help yourselves do the biology of life a little more correctly, a little more easily. And you may stun yourself, your family, and your medical team.
That's right. Mainly your medical team. That's because for many years, anyone who had an MS diagnosis, that was just death waiting to happen. Well, and who knew that a diagnosis of MS for Dr. Terry Wahls would turn into a blessing for not just you, but for thousands, millions, hundreds of thousands, millions of others. And look, that is, it's how we approach adversity. You could have, you could have just, and nobody would have faulted you if you would have just stayed in your bed and not gone into work after that diagnosis, or after you're not being able to walk very well. But you did, and you kept going because God had a plan for you. And it was to help all of us through your journey of pain, is to help all of us. So good on you. Good on you. So when this is 2007, when you're seeing this remarkable changes, or that you've been able to make some remarkable changes. So what is different from then? Because I know that you're very active in doing research. You're doing very active of teaching. You are changing the world, as I said earlier, one person at a time. And as I said, so many people have autoimmune disease, not just MS, but autoimmune conditions.
Correct.
1 in 10. That's a lot. First of all, I know things have changed, but what do you attribute this increase in autoimmune conditions that are happening today?
This is what I call a classic mismatch disease. And by that term, I mean that the evolutionary biology shows that when an organism reproduces, there's random mutations that occur. And over millions of years, those mutations cause the species to become more closely aligned with their environment and to have greater success, leading to more species, more comprehensive ecological systems. That's a very slow process. Human evolution in terms of our social construct and our environment has radically changed in a very rapid way. Our species separates from primates 6 million years ago. Our genus Homo, 2.5 million. Our species, Homo sapiens, 250,000 years. We had fire to cook 100,000 years. We learned how to ferment our food 100,000 years. 10,000 years, we developed the Industrial Revolution. Pardon me, I misspoke. 10,000 years ago, we developed cities and agricultures. And then, well, I'll go a little bit faster. 300 years ago, we really developed the Industrial Revolution. And then about 100 years ago, we started having fast food. We had far less activity. We became less and less an agricultural society. 100 years ago, we really ramped up the fast food. 30 years ago, we ramped up processed foods. We ate out away from our homes. We were much more isolated. 15 years ago, social media. And then, of course, the last 3 years, the pandemic. All of these things changed very, very rapidly. But our DNA expects a very different environment in terms of physical activity, social constructs, the food that we eat. That mismatch between what our DNA, how it evolved over millions of generations, and the social environment that we're in is radically different. Those are mismatched diseases. And that's what's driving anxiety, depression, mental health crises. That's what's driving our autoimmune problems. I think that's what's driving our poor socialization skills in our children, in our adults. So, I mean, I could wax eloquent about this mismatch problem and the types of interventions. And I think anyone who fails to think about the evolutionary biology and the fact that our interventions are not aligned with how our DNA evolved is doomed to fail.
Very true. As you were going through the history of how much we've grown as a society and evolved as a society, the word that kept coming is disconnection. We
Absolutely.
have disconnected to not only our food, we've disconnected to ourselves, and now with a pandemic, to others. And we've become like this island in our own. And so loneliness, I mean, I've done research on loneliness is like the number one cause of early death for people, is to not feel like they belong. And that's what centenarians have in common, that they still belong to a society, and we've detached and disconnected, and it's very sad. So as you are continuing to look at this in a very personal way and in a way to create change in the world, I'm sure things are different from when you started your journey. Have there been some notable changes, and what do you attribute those changes to? Yeah.
So, when I first started talking about my story, my recommendations, I was condemned. Like, oh my God, I was severely condemned by the multiple sclerosis clinical community.
Yes, I'm not surprised.
And by many of my conventional internal medicine physicians. My chief of staff called me to say, Terry, what's going on? People are complaining about what you're doing. Now, fortunately, I brought with me some scientific papers. We went through them, and I won him over and had to have the same conversation with the chief of medicine at the university. Unfortunately, I won him over. And they eventually directed me to begin doing clinical research. And then again, they directed me to write a case report with my treating medical team about my recovery, which we did. Then we had a case series about other folks who'd used those interventions and had done well. Then we did a single-arm clinical trial that was prospective. Those 20 folks with progressive MS did remarkably well. Then we started doing randomized controlled trials, remarkable success. And we've been publishing our papers. So I now have had over 30 papers published related to diet and multiple sclerosis, which have been cited, Lily, by over 1,700 other, scientific publications.
Wow.
We are going to the leading MS research, the Americans Committee on Treatment and Research in Multiple Sclerosis, called ACTRIMS. We've presented there every year the last 3 years. We've gone to the MS Consortium of Centers and present our research there, again, for the last 5 years. Last year, we had 3 oral presentations, 5 research posters. And so, I'm not so crazy anymore. And, the fact that I'm taking the time to publish, do rigorous scientific studies, publish my research, present them at scientific meetings, I am not so crazy anymore.
And you're also getting awards. I was there at the IFM, or is it IFM?
Yeah, IFM.
IFM, with 3,000 doctors, standing ovation when you received your award there. That was many years ago.
That was a wonderful.
It was touching. It was so touching. I think there was not a dry eye in the room. It was so, and that's when I first met you, and I was just so thrilled to have been there to witness this. But still, so many people don't know about you and what
correct.
you've done. And that's why I want you to come as often as you want to the classroom, because we need to get this information out. And by the way, for those of you that don't know about Dr. Wahls, she has a wonderful book called The Wahls Protocol. And you've been updating this book many times. It's revised and expanded. So let's talk about some of those changes and what you've seen in all these years. And then we can comment on to why is it that why is it that the medical protocols have not changed as quickly as I believe they should?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the fact that I do this really radical and very unusual thing. I do my research. I go to the scientific meetings. We present our research. And go on to the next study, keep writing my grants. At the same time that I'm doing my research, I have a variety of programs, and I am talking to the public about the things that I do and our research and the protocols that I think are worth using to improve your quality of life if you have an autoimmune disease. So I'm teaching the public at the same time that I'm doing my research. I also train clinicians, medical personnel, at the same time that I'm doing my research, because I don't think people should have to wait the 30 years that it takes to change the standard of care. If people right now think, vegetables are not too dangerous, meditation, mindfulness, that's probably not too dangerous, asking for a physical therapy consult to help me evaluate my mobility and help me design an exercise program to take care of my mobility problems, well, that's probably not too dangerous. Having a few targeted supplements to support my journey, that's probably not too dangerous. Doing it all, adding things one at a time, that's probably not too dangerous. And yes, there are people that are ready to go on that journey, and there are folks who want to wait for the standard of care to change. Both approaches are fine. My approach is I'll go where I'm invited. People who want to work with me, I'll welcome you. If you want to wait and say, I need you to finish your randomized double-blind controlled trials, I'm like, okay, I'm doing that. And you'll eventually see that. But unfortunately, if you have a autoimmune condition, even the best disease-modifying drug treatment doesn't stop the prevention. It slows it, which is wonderful. It'll give you an extra 5 years. For some conditions, maybe an extra 7, occasionally an extra 10 years before you're disabled. So I invite them, work on your diet, work on your exercise, work on all these lifestyle factors. And finally, now when I go to those scientific meetings, my colleagues there more and more are stopping me in the hallway saying, are you Dr. Wahls? And I have a few questions, and I'm gracious, always stop and answer the questions. And then they whip out their phone and they say, would it be okay? Could I have a selfie with you? My patients would so love that. And of course, I say, yes. No, that would be fine. I'd love to do the photo with you. So we're making progress. My ideas, which were so radical, are less and less radical. The early adopters are joining me.
That's amazing. You know what? You're not in here for a sprint. You're here for the long marathon.
It's a long marathon.
So it takes a while. I mean, I was just saying this last night, Dr. Wahls, that it took 20 years for doctors to accept washing hands between patients. It took 20 years to accept washing hands before touching a patient. And and this is a little bit more. I still, when I hear your story, I am dumbfounded that you had to convince people that what you were doing was working. That is, to me, your evidence. So how are you today? How are you today doing? I mean, these people that were asking for evidence, how are you today?
So how am I today? Let's talk about a recent family vacation. And we went to the Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. And at the end of May, we went hiking in the Rockies. I was like, I wasn't really sure how far I could go. Turns out, I can hike 3 hours.
Wow.
And we went up to the Ute, hiked up to the Ute Trail, was hiking around there 12,000 feet for 3 hours. Isn't that remarkable?
It is remarkable for anyone to do that.
And I can bike for hours. I can jog in the neighborhood. I do strength training. I do swimming. So I'm doing very well. We're having a wonderful time doing our research, writing grants. And I also, at the same time, doing these radical things, summits for the MS and neuroimmune community. Again, trying to reach tens of thousands of people to give them hope. My goal is to ultimately have these MS summits reach all million people here in the United States and all 2.8 million across the world. So I've made progress, but there's always more that we can do.
Absolutely. So the last time you were in the classroom, we talked about the research studies the trials that you guys were doing using nutritional excellence to improve health. Can you give us an update on that?
Sure. So we have an active trial right now comparing the modified paleo elimination diet, which is the diet that we've studied for actually several trials. And then the other diet is a time-restricted olive oil ketogenic diet. So it
olive oil?
Combines,
did you say olive oil?
Yep, olive oil, ketogenic. Okay. And then the third diet is people's usual diet. So that's the control group. We're looking for people ages 18 to 70 with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis who will come to Iowa at baseline, so month 0, back again at month 3, and back again at month 24. We will measure some clinical function of how you walk, how your hands work, some working memory. We'll get a non-contrast MRI so we can measure brain volume and changes in brain volume over 2 years. And we'll draw some blood and some saliva. It will be one of the largest, longest studies that have been done. It will have the most intensive biomarkers that we can do at the same time. And people ask me, why do we have this be randomized? Because people, they want to choose their diet. That's called a quasi-experimental study design. We have done that in the past, but it's not very strong evidence at the end. The strongest evidence is you have to randomize, so people get, if you're randomized to the ketogenic group, you're like, okay, I'll do a ketogenic diet. If I'm randomized to the paleo group, okay, I'll do the paleo diet. If you're in the usual diet, you get to do whatever you darn well please in terms of your eating. And this is real world a study. So whatever we'll try and help you be successful in whichever diet group you're in. But we just want to know what your experience is like.
Nice. Is there a cost involved?
Well, yes, you'll have to get to Iowa. We do have some limited funds to support the transportation up to 500 miles. Mm-hmm. So you can come from further than 500 miles away, but the compensation only covers 500 miles in that journey. And we follow the IRS guidelines in terms of travel reimbursement. Mm-hmm. There is no additional money for groceries or food. We don't have those kind of resources. Now, interestingly enough, I was looking at a paper that just came out from a colleague who studies ketogenic eating, and they followed the cost of the diet, being on the study diet. And I believe it was 65% of the folks said, 62% actually, said that it cost more. And the average cost was $100 more per week, or probably per month. Okay. So additional $100 per month for their study diet. However, the other 37% said that saved money. Mm-hmm. Because they were cooking their meals at home. They weren't going out to eat. They weren't having as much fast food. They weren't having as much junk food. They were actually buying ingredients, and they had learned how to do some cooking at home. So they saved money. We had thought about this a great deal. So we worked with the chef to give us a little cooking instructions and strategies on how to manage your time, your groceries, to make the time cost of being in the study less, mm-hmm. and to make the financial cost of basically improving your diet in a way that is more affordable and sustainable.
Yeah. I mean, I know people that don't cook at home. They eat out almost every night, lunch, breakfast, dinner. I don't know why they do that. And some of these people claim they don't have time to do anything. And let me tell you, when I prepare things, when I do my batch cooking at home, I have those foods for the rest of the week that I can just quickly go. I save so much time by doing it at home. And it used to be that we used to, it was a treat to go out to eat. It's not a treat anymore. I love it. It
was a very rare thing for me growing up. And that was true for most citizens here in the United States when I was young. Now, I believe if we looked at fast food consumption, in average, 37% of us are eating fast food every day. And the younger you are, the higher that number is. And if you're under the age of 25, it was almost 70% of those individuals that had fast food that day.
Wow.
It is huge. We have to assume, and we assume in our study, that people don't know how to cook, don't know how to shop, don't know how to meal plan. So we've created a study app with a partner that has recipes and some cooking tips for the paleo diet and the ketogenic diet. And as I said, that we had created, our chef had helped with several lessons to address how we batch cook, how we meal plan, because part of the burden is the time pressure that many of us experience. And many folks have in the past, they cook food, or they go to the grocery store, buy food, but never get around to making it. And so there's so much food waste. Or they cook their food, they have leftovers, they don't know what to do with it, and there's food waste. So
I need to introduce them to a freezer.
well, and for a variety, there are a host of reasons why people have food waste, and that's part of what we talk about to make again the study more manageable for people, so it doesn't cost more, and to help them manage both the time pressure and having some tips and guidance on how to meal plan will help you deal with time pressure and the dollar pressure for how we feed ourselves.
You know, it sounds like to me you're teaching basic life skills to people that have this condition.
Well, we want them to be successful in the study.
Yes.
And it's certainly absolutely true that for many, and this is what I do for my patients as well, is well, because people aren't learning these basic skills: how to meal plan, how to shop, how to make sure that I am not having food waste, how to make this manageable time-wise and dollar-wise. And I stress that if we don't do this, your health will decline much more rapidly. So, and again, few of us can overhaul our life immediately. We need small, achievable steps for this week. I get that one down. I can do it repeatedly. Okay, I've got that step incorporated into my daily life. Now let's think about what's the next step that you want to do. And it's never the step that I choose. We need to help our patients, the people in our groups, to reflect what's their next step. We can help them select and guide them, but it needs to be a step close to their heart that they feel like they can do next.
I love it. I love how you are incorporating what happened to you into a lifestyle improvement, because many people that find themselves in situations of health, that's when they're most open to trying new things, maybe even radical things, which is what we talk about here. And I just want to take a little break to talk about my website and the things that we're doing to help as well. Go to whenyounneedafriend.com. While you go to whenyounneedafriend.com, please subscribe, like, and follow me on all social media. Share this video with your friends. We know somebody with autoimmune condition. Everybody knows somebody. If 1 of 10 of your friends you can talk to, but share this video, let them know that there is hope. Also check out we're actually doing a workshop, and of course I had the book with me, and because I was reading it earlier, I was doing my yogurt, my cultured meal with Super Guide. I normally have the book handy, but I don't have the book handy right now. But we're in the middle of doing the Super Gut program, which is no grains, and it is no sugars and no fast foods, no processed, and eating the foods that you love and that are healthy for you. So I'm in the middle of doing that, plus adding some microbes that will help improve our microbiome. So check that out. Go to whenyouneedafriend.com. Also, we have Dr. Bradley Nelson coming to the Cape Canaveral, Florida for the emotion code and the body code. We're doing this workshop on November 3rd and 4th. So go to whenyouneedafriend.com and register today for that. We still have early registration pricing, so take advantage of that as well. I love a good deal. Check out my Shop Now bag. We have products there that are Lilly approved from head to toe. And just know that if you have any questions on that, you can always text me at 407-373-5959, or you can email me at lily@whenyouneedafriend.com. There's another way that you can help the classroom out. You can become your sponsor. Please support our sponsors, support them as they're supporting our classroom. And last but not least, you can become an enrolled student in the classroom. And whether it's $1 or $1,000 a month or a one-time donation of your time, talent, treasure, everything is welcome. And I'm welcoming today Dr. Terry Wall, who is just absolutely phenomenal. I love her hero's journey. I love the fact that she's taken something that was tragic in her life that could have ended in death, and she is living more now. I could probably say you're living more now than you did before you got sick. Once again, the book is called The Wahls Protocol. You can go to terrywahls.com and learn more about what she is doing. Would you like to give us any more updates? What are some of the other things that we can join in to do with you, Dr. Wahls?
Well, the first and the most important thing is pick up my book. It's really transformative. We also, as I said, have the MS study. You can learn more about that at terrywahls.com/MS study. And I encourage everyone to think about and to sign up for my newsletter at terrywahls.com/email, because one of the most interesting things that I have is my weekly research updates, because every week I get updates on the latest on diet, clinical trials, behavior trials, and treatment trials for MS and autoimmune. And I will review a couple of those interesting studies, because I want people to know what are the studies saying about the things that we could be doing and adding into our self-care routine, and let our primary care team know that we've made these changes, because as our cells work better, our symptoms reduce and our need for prescription meds typically reduces. So bit by bit, the more you learn, the more empowered you are that there's stuff that you can do.
Absolutely. I love how much hope is in here. So as I mentioned before, I'm sure that when you were going through this journey and you were in it, learning and growing, not knowing what would happen, you were doing a lot of things that maybe was a nice to, but not a need to. Have you condensed your protocol, and what are some of the things that we need to be aware of some of these changes?
Yeah. So some key things. Know your why, because any refinement of your behaviors, diet, and lifestyle is much easier if you understand your why, what you want your health for. A big question I ask my patients is, if your home was on fire, smoke spilling out of the windows, is there someone or something that you treasure so much you'd run over broken glass to go save? And you'd run barefoot over broken glass to go save, because without even thinking. If there's nothing that they can come up with, then I send that person to talk therapy for them to figure out the meaning of their life. But for most people, we help them identify their why. Now they can begin the work of doing the journey. And then I have my next question is, do you want to work on improving your diet? Do you want to work on managing your stress? Do you want to work on your sleep? Do you want to work on improving your strength and your muscle mass? And once we figure out which domain they want to work on, then we can begin improving those domains. In the diet, I think we have a really wonderful analysis of all the diet studies that have been done in the setting of MS. 12 studies looking at 8 diets: the ketogenic diet, Mediterranean diet, paleo diet, low-fat diet, anti-inflammation diet, calorie restriction, fasting diets, and usual diet. And we looked at studies that had included fatigue or quality of life. And the 2 diets that were really most helpful were the Mediterranean and the paleo diet. And the paleo diet was basically twice as effective as the Mediterranean diet. So I think we can confidently say, while we still need more research, better studies, longer studies, the research is very clear that the paleo diet is the most effective if you can do it. But if you can't do it, then do the Mediterranean diet. There is certainly reason to think that olive oil, stress eating more olive oil, it's super helpful. A lower carb diet may be superior, and perhaps my version of the olive oil ketogenic diet in the next study may prove to be superior to the paleo diet.
Really?
We don't know. So I think it's a refinement. So I can't, in good conscience, recommend that as the most superior option. We're going to have a research study. I won't know the results of that study until 2027. But I think what I do personally now is I do a lot of time-restricted eating, a lot of intermittent fasting, lots of olive oil-based pestos that I make. I have in my refrigerator, and I use as a dipping sauce with my root vegetables. And so I'll have 2 to 4 tablespoons of this olive oil pesto every single day, probably much more like 4 tablespoons, to stress that olive oil. So I do that all summer long. And then when winter comes, then I just have to pour the olive oil over my food, as opposed to getting to have it in this yummy pesto. But I think olive oil is probably super helpful. So I stress that more. I think intermittent fasting, intermittent calorie restriction may be super helpful. However, having said all that, Lily, working on your self-care as a family at the pace that you and your family can do successfully is the core message that I teach the public. In my clinical trials, we can test a variety of diets to see which diet may be, technically better than the others. But the reality is, consistently we know the standard American diet is terrible for us. We need to have you improve your diet, and if what speaks to you is a ketogenic diet, do that. If what speaks to you is a low saturated fat swank diet, that's fine, do that. If what speaks to you is the paleo diet, well, do that, because that has the best evidence. But there are many diets that I think are fine if that's what you and your family can do. You'll be much more successful. If you want to do the paleo diet, but the rest of your family wants to do the Mediterranean diet, and it's a big fight, don't have the fight. Do the Mediterranean diet. And then gradually make it a little more paleo-like. But
what are some of the key difference? Because I always kind of bundle paleo and keto in the same kind of, what are
So,
some of the differences of?
so the standard ketogenic diet, if you go out on the internet, you'll see a lot of eggs, a lot of dairy. It's going to be low carb. We probably have about 80 grams of protein and 30 to 50 grams of carbs.
Okay.
And probably a 90% of your calories coming from fat. My version does not have so much dairy. And my version would have olive oil for your fat as opposed to butter and cream. And I predict that my version, particularly when it's combined with time-restricted eating, will have superior outcomes. And so we have to do a lot of educating of our study folks to say, you can't be following the ketogenic diets plan that are out there in the public space because it is different than our ketogenic plan.
Mm-hmm.
Then if the person happens to be allergic to olives, and we have a few folks that are, then we have a slightly different monosaturated fat that we have them use.
Avocado or what?
Yeah,
avocado. Yeah, very nice.
Sesame oil could also work, but avocado's better.
What about flax oil?
So flax, hemp, walnut oil, though people in our ketogenic arm, yes, we have them use that as well.
Very good, very good. Is this very, very interesting?
Now, the paleo diet it is lower carb than the standard American diet, which is about 250 grams of carbs per day. The paleo diet in our studies range between 80 and 100 grams of carbs per day. So about half the amount of carbs that the standard American diet. The keto diet will have about 30 grams of carbs a day. So it's lower yet on carbs.
You know, I'm realizing that some of the carbs in let me just not pick on carbs here. Let me just pick on the food industry have created food addicts, no different than heroin addicts, that they would rather die eating whatever it is that they're eating than to live and falling in love with different foods. And so we've got about 4 minutes left in the broadcast today, and I'm so enjoying this conversation. I would love for it to be much longer. But what would you say to people that are so married to their food that they would say, I'd rather, I'm not going to give up my meat, and I'm not going to, I always tell them, you're much more than a piece of meat, you're worth more than a piece of meat, but they're not willing to give up their grains and their meats or their fried foods and their processed foods. What would you say to them?
Well, they're addicted. Just like people may be addicted to tobacco, alcohol. I'll ask them, what is their why? I engage their why, and then begin one small step at a time to make improvements in their self-care routine. I used to insist that we do that with diet. Now I'm a little more flexible because some people need to reduce their stress, work on meditation, perhaps work on their sleep, work on their exercise, and then they can come back and say, you know what, we're willing to work on our diet. And then we begin, okay, so what's the next achievable step? It might be eliminating sugar-sweetened beverages and just having water. It might be eliminating fast foods. It might be adding in more greens. And I tell my folks that for most, doing the additions first will be much easier than doing the subtractions. So if I can get them to work towards the 9 cups of vegetables and not worry about the subtractions, the 9 cups of vegetables will displace some of the processed foods, and then it becomes easier. But it has to be a journey at the pace that the person is willing to take. And if they're able to do it as a family, they'll be more successful. When they get to the point where they're reducing, eliminating foods, get them out of the visual space, because that will make it easier to be successful.
Very good.
And you may benefit from talk therapy and counseling on how to be more successful with adapting the health behaviors that you have determined you're ready to tackle next, as you're one step at a time.
Well, I tell you what, as I hear you talk about paleo, for some reason, I really haven't learned the differences between. I think I would be more paleo, more of a vegetarian paleo, or a vegan paleo, but because I don't do any dairy. I don't do any dairy, so or any butter or anything like that. So it sounds like to me I've discovered something new about paleo today.
Right.
And
it's certainly possible. In that I would call you probably sort of that pegan, the vegan who has adopted many of the paleo principles, and it's certainly possible. I work very hard to listen to people's cultural and values, their spiritual values, and figure out how we can improve their diet and self-care while honoring their cultural and ethnic backgrounds. So we've adapted this for the African American community. We've adapted it to the Hispanic community. I've adapted it to people from the subcontinent of India. I have family living in Japan, so we've adapted these concepts into the Japanese cuisine.
I love it.
So yes, these concepts can be adapted to your ethnic background, to your cultural background, and to your cuisine background.
Awesome. And for those of you, again, you go to terrywahls.com/MS study and see if this works for you, and be proactive in helping the world through your journey as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Wahls. The book is called The Wahls Protocol. I urge you to get it. And I would love to have some more time, but I just know that we will see you soon, because I do want to talk some more about people with autoimmune conditions and how that compares to MS, but that'll be our next conversation. So thank you so much, Dr. Wahls, for everything that you do, and may God continue to bless you, your health, and the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyounneedafriend.com. This is Lillian McDermott and Dr. Terry Wahls wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before